This is Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
I shudder thinking how the world can be so cruel. I lend my voice to those who can't. It's time we try, it's time we care, it's time we stand. It starts with a voice.
Welcome to the Special Chronicles Show. This is episode 528. My name is Daniel Smrokowski, and I'm the founder of Special Chronicles and a Special Olympics Sargent Shriver International Global Messenger. Our website, specialchronicles.com. That's specialchronicles.com, where you can stream our archives of over 750 episodes absolutely for free, and to follow Special Chronicles on social media, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. This week, on a special Rebroadcast episode of the Special Chronicles Podcast, our guest was recently named one of USA Today's Woman of the Year, Special Olympics Chief Inspiration Officer Loretta Clairborne. Loretta has always been a megastar in Special Olympics movement. Now the world will get to see her on the global stage as we go on the road to the world's largest inclusive sports event, Special Olympics World Games Berlin 2023. Please put your virtual hands together as we welcome Loretta Clairborne on a special rebroadcast of the Special Chronicles Show on specialchronicles.com.
This is Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
Podcasting since 2008. This is the show where we're broadcasting disability stories from an insider's perspective, and we are giving a voice to people with special needs. This is your weekly guide to find and enjoy acceptance and inclusion.
I shudder thinking how the world can be so cruel. I lend my voice to those who can't. It's time we try, it's time we care, it's time we stand. It starts with a voice.
Coming up on the Special Chronicles Show, episode 397, we feature a conversation with Special Olympics Chief Inspiration Officer Loretta Clairborne. Is coming up right now on specialchronicles.com. And welcome back to the Special Chronicles Show. My name is Daniel. I am your host and founder of Special Chronicles and a Sargent Shriver International Global Messenger of Special Olympics. Welcome to the Special Chronicles Show, Loretta.
Thank you.
And let's a brief programming note for our listeners. The Special Chronicles Show is produced by the Special Chronicles Network. For 12 plus years, we have been producing groundbreaking and award-winning podcasts to give respect and voice to people with special needs. Listen to hundreds of podcasts heard globally by thousands of listeners for free and on demand at specialchronicles.com and on podcast apps everywhere. Just search for Special Chronicles. Support for Special Chronicles comes from listeners like you. We join our supporters as we are currently raising $12,000 in celebration of a 12-year celebration at Special Chronicles. Please support this podcast and more podcasts like it at specialchronicles.com/give. That's specialchronicles.com/give. And why don't we begin, Loretta, and have you begin by introducing yourself to our listeners and tell us about your brief backstory, your family, early years in Special Olympics, and your connection to our Special Olympics movement, and including your role on the board of directors and as an athlete leader.
Sure. I been born, I guess, in the 50s. My mother had really 9 children, but 7 living children. She raised us all single-handedly. And when it came time to go to school, she wanted to make sure that one thing we had was good morals. And she was really strict. She didn't take nothing from none of her 7 children, and that included me. She was tough on me. I couldn't get away with nothing. I got the bit strapped just as much as everybody else did. One time came time to go to school, I knew I was different because my sisters were progressing. They were reading and everything, and I was just having a tough time at it. For instance, like this saying the alphabet, it was hard for me. By the time I hit kindergarten or second grade, I was just remembering the whole thing. And I sang it. I didn't say it.
Mm-hmm.
It was just really tough, but I wanted to be on par just like every other kid. And I was held back those first 3 years. But my mom, being a stern person, she fought for me to stay in that regular school. They had special education classes, and she just said to the school board, hey, you have a special education class? You're going to teach my daughter.
Yeah.
Made sure that happened. And then when I got out of school, my first year out of school, I went to a shelter workshop. They were preparing me for the next part of my life, for my future, and probably the end of that was all you're going to do, was work in a shelter workshop. I graduated from high school like every other kid who graduated in a special education class. Most of those kids got what they call a certificate.
Yeah.
My mom fought for me to get a diploma that says Loretta Clairborne has completed her studies at William Penn Senior High School. And that was my mom's big hurrah for her daughter to graduate like her other 6 living children. And as time went by, I went to the workshop, and a counselor met me there at a workshop. He was like the psychologist, and he would notice I ran back and forth to work instead of taking the bus. Well, I didn't want to take the bus because I always had problems with people and the snickering, and I just decided, well, I run every day anyway with my brother Hank. I'm going to run to work, and I don't have no problems. And that's what I did, and he introduced me to Special Olympics. Mm-hmm. I first was introduced. You had to practice up at the field from the workshop, run around a couple times and did exercises. And then I came home, and who would ever think that Special Olympics only had one event in our area, was swimming, and I wasn't good at that.
Yeah.
Most blacks didn't go to swimming pools, so we didn't learn how to swim. But there were some kids who could swim like fish. There was actually a kid I knew, they called him Dolphin. That was his name. Swim like a fish. But my thing was running, and that's when I got involved in Special Olympics. And when I look back at what the power of Special Olympics today, how it's not only impacting people with intellectual disability, but all people, going back to our young people, our students in the schools, Unified Champion schools. Mm-hmm. It just opened my voice up. And it was a coach to me. It said one day, Loretta, I'm not going to answer your questions for you. I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to tell me. You have a voice and use it. And that's basically, from that point, I started to use my voice. And today I serve as the Chief Inspirational Officer for Special Olympics. It's a tough title. And, at first I said, well, I can remember back when I said, I don't talk. I just do this.
Yeah.
Use my voice.
Awesome.
That's how I speak. And today I don't have to use my fist. I speak on behalf of all people with intellectual disability, and even those without intellectual disability, school teachers, professors, people of law, all the way up to the United Nations, and being the Chief Inspirational Officer. It's a tough job. It's not just a title. You work for it.
Yeah, awesome. You touched on a couple of things that I want to, as we continue to talk about your story. And one is you talk about workshops, and I think that was a lot. I'm a little, just a little bit younger than you, but I think for both of us, and particularly for you, along if we look back, 50 years ago. There was
not even that.
Yeah, not even that. Yeah, that it was like there were for a lot of us, like you and myself, and the over 6 million athletes across the globe, and for a lot of us with intellectual disabilities, that was all people thought that we were able to do. And now we're able to, the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing as a Southern Tribal International Global Ambassador, and that the work that we're doing, we're able to show them that there's a lot more that we're able to do, not just on the field, but also off the field through our leadership. And so I guess, where do you think that change is? How do you think we were able to kind of go from what it was not that many years ago to today?
Well, it was the persistence of hard work, and two, that was better than going to where a lot of my friends, they were like disappearing, and I didn't understand where they were going. You got to remember that most people in the time I grew up were warehoused in institutions. You might as well say like modern day jails now.
Yeah.
They were in jail for a crime they didn't commit. So to get those people out of institutions, it took a lot of hard work of parents. It took a lot of hard work of people, but for a lot of people that didn't show, because that was almost like the law. You either go to a workshop or you go to be warehoused in an institution. My mom fought that. But then there was a lady named Eunice Kennedy Shriver. And I think looking back at her brother was the president of the United States.
Yeah.
And she had a sister who had intellectual disability. And she thought about her sister, and she thought, how would society look at people? Look at them now. They're looking at these people like as if they're worthless. And two, at a time when she done it, our country was broken in riots and a lot of despair against people accepting each other just because of the color of the skin. And here, they really denounce people who learn differently. And I don't know if you know the names, imbecile, oh, you're an imbecile, you're an idiot, you're a moron. And it was a lady who had faith, who had belief that people had value. And when she came out with Special Olympics, who would have thought it would have been 50 years? So I thought, here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
But this woman, she went to her brother, and I guess her brother was president, and I can still see the little boy accepting the certificate about opening the world for people who are differently able. And today, great team of people, it's known in society that these people can do something. And she did it with one simple thing called sport. Everybody likes to run. Everybody likes to throw a ball. So she was on a mission. She knew that people love sports.
Awesome.
People love music. People love to eat. But everybody, you can get out and kick a ball, whether you do it by yourself. I think that was one of the keys to opening the doors to success for our people today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Years later.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're going to get into the other note that I made about you. You said that it's a tough job. It's a tough title as Chief Information Officer for our movement for Special Olympics. So I should say at Special Olympics. We'll get to that maybe a little bit later, because you mentioned our founder of Special Olympics, Eunice Shriver. And it's a good transition. And a lot of times when you listen to podcasts, we go from one segment to another one. We transition, or like if we're telling a story, we transition from one part to another part. So that's a good transition, and take us back to when you first got involved as an athlete and meeting our Special Olympics founder, Eunice Shriver, and her son, Tim, that we're both friends with.
Well, I was at the workshop in 1970, and the counselor there, Mr. Gilreath, noticed me running back and forth to the workshop. And he says, I think I have something for you, because he knew I had some anger issues, as they would call it today. And he called me into his office, and he sat me down after a rough day. And he says, I think I have something for you. I notice you like to run. I see you running every morning, coming to the workshop, and you can get the bus free. And I said, I always run. Me and my brother run. We've been running since 1966. So at the end of the day, after a rough day, he called me in the office and he gave me a paper. And I couldn't read it that well. And I knew the word Olympics, and I can associate with the Olympics, because back when we watched the TV, and for almost 3 weeks, the only thing that came on TV was the Olympics on NBC. Yeah. I remember watching it and sitting there dreaming that I'm going to be like Wilma Rudolph. I was a kid. I had dreams just like everyone else, whether they could become a reality or not. And then years later, I had the opportunity, that was in 70 and 72, I had the opportunity to go to Los Angeles, California, and I never forget it, Drake Stadium at UCLA. At night, I ran in my race, some girl cut me off, and my counselor knew I was getting really angry, so she decided to walk me to the dorm, and we saw this lady walking across the field. My counselor said, "Stop. Wait a minute, Loretta. Stop right now. I want to talk. I want you to meet somebody." And this lady was going through the field. I could see her with this note clip in her hand. She had a hat on and a skirt. And I thought to myself, why is that lady wearing a skirt? But I guess she was here, talked at the beginning of the whole event. And she said to me, she introduced me, and Eunice knew that I was upset. For some reason, she read my mind, and that was in 1972. And as time went by, several years later, I went down to New York Avenue. I'll never forget it. The office was there in the 80s, the early 80s. I met her the second time in 80 at a race. She says, "I want you to come and be my friend." And she gave me this little card. I still have it today. And she says, "I want you to come over to our office." So she got in touch with the lady who was helping me out. And the lady brought me to the office. And that had to be 1983, 84. And we just became friends. I would go down to New York Avenue. I knew how to use the Greyhound bus. And I got off the bus. I knew how to get on the subway and come over to the office, or somebody would pick me up. And that was it. And I met a friend who was a friend of mine forever. And I thought, oh, well, when I first met her, I said, yeah, everybody says they want to be a friend and then want to away from you. They never even think about you. But that wasn't her. That wasn't her. Yeah. She asked me at a race in Washington, D.C. I'll never forget, as long as I live, in 1980. She says, "I want you to be my friend." And I looked at her.
Awesome.
I thought she didn't take me serious, and dug in her pocketbook and got this little card out. And then the office evidently was on K Street. And then the next year or two, I made the trip down on the bus, and that was it.
Awesome.
Years later, I met her son, Tim, and he was just young. But I didn't really get to know him until several years later, and she wanted me to, do a favor for her. I was like, "What's your favor?" She says, "I want you to talk to my son." And I was like, "Well, Eunice," because she wouldn't let me call her Mr. Shriver. Yeah. I know your son. I know Tim. I know Mark, but I don't know him that well. She says, "Well, you'll know him." And she wanted me to talk to her son because her and her husband was getting older, and she wanted to make sure that Special Olympics was in the right hands. Yeah. And I remember driving in the car with Tim, and him and I would talk up a breeze, and he would say, "Well, Loretta, what do you think?" And I would say, "Tim, I have a favor to do for your mother." "Oh, what is it?" And then he knew. I said, "Well, are you interested in working Special Olympics?" He came to chairperson of the games in Connecticut. So those, to prepare for those games, they started in 92, 93, and those games went off in 95. And the next thing, ching, ching, I won that bet. He became the person who ran Special Olympics. And he still teases me to this day. I owe him.
Awesome. Well, our guest on the Special Chronicles show is Loretta Clairborne, Chief Information Officer at Special Olympics. talk to us. Sports are a big part of our movement, and I compete in swimming and basketball. Started in unified golf, which that conversation of starting unified golf actually started when we were in Abu Dhabi at those World Games last year in March 2019, and now so like that first conversation started there, and so tell us about the sports that you have competed in, and if you're currently still competing today.
Of course, Special Olympics in my area, the first things they had was swimming and athletics, which we call track and field. Mm-hmm. And it was a no-brainer. Everybody wanted to run, and if you could swim, everybody wanted to swim. Well, I learned how to swim, and I wasn't too good at swimming. And I said to my coach, I looked at her one day, I said, Miss Michelle, you know black people don't swim. They float. They just drown because they got too much muscle. And she said, that's a myth. I said, no, it's not. And it wasn't a myth. But I started out with athletics. They tried to get me into swimming because athletics was a no-brainer for me. I ran around the housing project. There was boundaries to where I could run, and I've been running since 1966. And my brother was a cross-country runner, so to get out working dishes, I would follow my brother. Mm-hmm. And that's what I started out. And then I did a couple contests in swimming. I didn't fare out well, but I achieved my goal, was to learn how to swim. And I did achieve that. And there were other sports that I've done, but right now I do like 10 sports. I mean, I play bocce. Well, you can't do anything right now.
Yeah.
Pandemic. But if I was currently practicing right now, my sport would be soccer. Mm-hmm. And I would, I still run just for exercise stuff. But I did long distance running. I did softball. These are sports I don't do anymore, but softball I don't do anymore. Swimming. I started out with athletics and track and field, but I still run just for exercise and fitness.
Yeah.
And I golf. I play floor hockey. I play soccer, basketball. What else do I do? Tennis, volleyball. I just started volleyball. Last year, I started kayaking last year. I wanted to try some new sports. I figure skate. I ski. I used to roller skate. I don't roller skate anymore because they just turned it to just regular racing, and I like to do the figures like in figure skate.
Yeah.
Well, I do a lot of sports.
Awesome. Well, as you know, athlete leadership is another part of programs that we have at Special Olympics, sports, leadership, health. And so we're both athlete leaders, and tell us about your involvement as an athlete leader. How did you first become a athlete leader, and tell us a little bit about your leadership journey.
Sure. Well, back in the 80s, I started out speaking with my advocate, Miss Janet McFarland, who worked for the ARC of Pennsylvania at the time. She worked right under the governor in the office. And that's where she first met me. And I remember when I first met her, I met her through a lady that lived next door because I babysat for that lady's kids. And I had just came back from the Boston Marathon or something like that, and I was babysitting. And at that time, the governor was trying to find somebody to speak for the ARC. And he wanted a consumer to speak. They didn't like the title client because that's what they refer to us as, client. And I don't like that title either because that's like you're begging for welfare. But anyway, getting back to that, Miss Janice says, Loretta, you can speak. And I started speaking. And she took me to a group of people down near Philadelphia called Speaking for Ourselves. And I started talking in that group. Special Olympics didn't have athlete leadership back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Finally, as time went by, I was back and forth to the office on the Greyhound bus. And then I seen a friend of mine. His name was Dave Lennox, who worked for Special Olympics. He just retired. Yeah. And I looked on his door. I said, Mr. Dave, why you got that sign up on your door? Show me the athlete. He said, come in, Loretta. And he sat me down. He says, the reason that sign is up there, because in this office, there are a lot of athletes who work here. Renee, and I said, oh yeah, Renee, Bobby, I start naming them down the row.
Yeah.
He said, yes, this program is for our athletes. And we hear people like me, meaning him, we're always talking. And I keep telling the staff, show me the athlete. You have a voice, you can speak. So we're going to try to start this new program. This was in the 93, 94. We're going to start this program. And I was sitting there thinking, I said, well, what is it? He says, well, I think you athletes have a voice, and you should be in the process of helping to see what you want as athletes. As time went by, athlete leadership was created. And the first program they started out was Global Messengers, but it wasn't called Global Messengers then. It was called Athletes for Outreach. And that's to get the athletes to speak in their local programs about raising money, about the awareness of Special Olympics, what Special Olympics does for them. And I remember the simple speech. It was basically, hello, my name is Loretta Clairborne. I'm a Special Olympics athlete in York County, and my sports are bowling, hockey, basketball, and then I would talk about my sports, and hopefully at the end, another person will come in who's on the stage with me and talk about the program, and then try to raise money, try to raise awareness, and just basically try to get people involved. Now you look at athlete leadership, governance, you have athlete input councils, you have athletes on boards, you have athletes doing everything.
Yeah, awesome.
So in that short, 1994, 95, it was amazing how athlete leadership has expanded. And it does take a role in the whole process of the games.
Absolutely. And you said that, so the original name was Athletes for Outreach, and so the way the athlete leadership program, you said, started in 1993 to 90.
That was it. That was in the talking points of it, and there was a couple people that a couple athletes would get up on the stage and say their name and about Special Olympics. It wasn't really formed into a really good form of having athletes taking the other roles. Because I remember Miss Janet and the local athletes here, it was Jeannie Goodling, Tim Moran, and we found out that Tim is not a speaker, but he has a phenomenal memory and he has a heck of a voice. Mm-hmm. So then they start, with the athlete leadership. Yeah. And Tim, his leadership part was to sing the national anthem at our games, at our local games. And that's basically how it started.
Awesome. And so were you, I know, I've met Custo Edwards, and I think he was in one of the first, I think he was in the first class of Southern Shriver International Global Messengers. So
1998.
Yeah. So were you one of the first athletes in the athlete leadership program?
I never took a course. I was a part of the athlete leadership program back then. In fact, I introduced that first class, which Kester, Stacy, there's a lady from Sonia something, she's from your state, Illinois.
Yeah.
And I introduced that first group, but I never took the classes because basically with Miss Janet being my advocate, she was the one that told me that she wanted me to go and speak on behalf of the ARC in Pennsylvania.
Awesome. And so when you introduced that first class of SSIGMs, tell us a little bit about what was that like, get into, introduce, and meet that first class. And now So I'm in the current class of SSIGMs, and it's a really big honor and a big responsibility that, just like you have in your role as Chief Inspiration Officer, to be a Southern Shriver in International Global Messenger. It's a big honor, and you get a lot of amazing opportunities. So, tell us, what was it like getting to meet and talk with the first class? I know when I've had an opportunity to talk with Custo a few times, and I interviewed him a few times on this program when I was in Washington D.C. And I know one time when I interviewed Custo, and he talked about getting an honorary USP award. He was in tears when I asked him to talk about that. And so, tell us a little bit about your experience meeting the first class of SSIGMs.
Well, when I first met the first class, I flew out to Chicago, and I kind of knew what was going to happen because they had interviewed these people. I didn't know none of them. So I tried to really introduce myself, but the session, it happened so fast. It's like, you ever have something that's so exciting and then boom, it's over?
Yeah.
You prepare and it's over. Well, I did get to talk to Stacy, the young lady, because they wanted the girls in skirts and she wanted to wear pants. And we were trying to tell her that we like the ladies in skirts, so it looks more uniform. So it was easier for the international people and people around the world to point out that those are the ladies who have the skirts on, and those are the guys and that who have the pants on. We had this jacket, and if a woman had pants on at the time, she looked just like the guys. If her hair was, of course, like mine. If I have a jacket on and I'm standing in a bunch of men, and I had the same jacket on and same khakis as they have, I looked the same. So they wanted me to work on getting Miss Stacy to wear slacks, and finally to wear a skirt. And finally, I worked with her. She was my person to work with to prep her for this. And we got her to wear the skirt. It was tough. And then I got to talk to Kester a little bit. And Ephraim, he just passed away. But I got to talk to some of the athletes. And it was Sonia, I think her name was. She was from Illinois. Yeah. And I remember her. So I got to talk to a few of them at a short scan, but their schedules were so busy. So basically, it was to memorize their name, to introduce them, and that was my job at the time.
Awesome.
As soon as they were introduced and got their plaques and everything, they got their pictures taken, boom, they were off to another event. Yeah. Tim Shriver and I got left at the library because we went to the bathroom. My meeting of the Global Messengers at that time, the Sargent Shriver Global Messengers.
Awesome. Well, we're going to...
I met them here, back and forth as they were doing different roles. It was really neat. I would see, like, the young lady from Chicago area, and then I would see Kester somewhere. So then I got to really know them.
Neat. And... Yeah, and we'll get into a little bit. We're going to go ahead and take a short sponsor break, but when we come back, we'll one of the things we'll talk about is I think I forgot to put it in the notes, but we'll talk about when we first met at the 50th, but then also when we were together in Abu Dhabi, and you got to meet more of our class of Southern Shriver International Global Messengers. Plus we'll touch on 50 Game Changers, and when you had a movie made about you, and getting the ESPY award. So those and lessons learned from being involved in athlete leadership and being a public speaker. So all that is coming up after the break. So don't hit pause. You can fast forward if you want, but don't hit pause. Our guest is Loretta Clairborne on the Special Chronicles show. right here on SpecialChronicles.com. We'll be right back after a quick message from our sponsors.
Hi, my name is Lisa Noble, and I'm a ComEd Energy Force Ambassador and an athlete with Special Olympics Illinois.
Hi, my name is Daniel Smrokowski, and I also am a ComEd Energy Force Ambassador and founder of a company called Special Chronicles.
The ComEd Energy Force program is a program that hires people with disabilities to teach the public how to save energy and money.
It's the country's first energy efficiency program of its kind.
Saving energy is especially important while everyone is at home due to COVID-19. We're using more electricity than ever before. Just think about how many more times you are opening the refrigerator door these days.
And while the economy is stressed, it's more critical than ever to save money where we can. Following these tips can save energy and money in this time of COVID-19.
Wash your clothes in cold water and use the dryer sparingly.
Your dryer can take up to 7 times more energy than the washer.
Turn off and unplug any electrical devices or power strips you are not using.
Electrical devices can continue to zap power even when turned off if they're still plugged in. We call them vampire devices.
Use LED bulbs.
They use 25% less energy than incandescent bulbs and last up to 25 times longer, saving you lots of money over time.
Keep your refrigerator between 35 and 38 degrees.
And be sure to use Energy-Star appliances.
And last but not least, check out ComEd.com/home savings for more tips and rebates.
Lisa and I would like to thank you for taking the time to listen to us today.
Remember, we are all in this together.
Stay healthy.
And stay safe.
Bye.
This episode is brought to you by listeners like you. Please support this podcast at specialchronicles.com/give. That's specialchronicles.com/give.
And quick message from a brief PSA.
We're not just athletes.
We are the ambassadors of an uprising.
Peaceful protesters.
In a rebellion against anyone
who has a fear of difference.
Difference.
Our demands are
equality,
dignity,
and the recognition of our shared humanity.
We will not stop
or accept anything less.
Today, our world is
more divided than ever.
And coming together has never been more urgent.
The revolution
is inclusion.
Find out more at jointherevolution.org.
You're listening to the Special Chronicles show right here on SpecialChronicles.com. Our guest is Loretta Clairborne, Chief Inspirational Officer at Special Olympics, for sitting down for a conversation all about a whole story. And welcome back, Loretta.
Thank you.
And let's now move on and tell us a little bit about the lessons that you learned from being involved in athlete leadership, even though you were never kind of officially trained in the Special Olympics athlete leadership program, but lessons that you learned of being a public speaker for PodmanDan in the athlete in the athlete leadership program.
The lessons I've learned through being through athlete leadership, there were a lot of lessons. And one of the lessons I really learned that if I open my voice, open my mouth, and use it in a productive way, I can go much farther than using it in a negative way. And one of the lessons I learned is I could take what I've learned from athlete leadership anywhere. And it's funny because even in my community, there'll be a group of people sitting and talking, and they'll say, oh, well, there's a meeting tonight, blah, 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 blah. Then everybody goes to the meeting and they sit back, and I'm like, we're here at the Special Olympics meeting. We're all athletes. And now we're here to talk about how our program is going to be ran. Mm-hmm. All of us got to speak. So basically, I took those skills that I used from athlete leadership, where you have to sometimes stand up and start the fire, strike the match or flick the lighter to start the fire, to light the candles, because everybody else is going to sit around. And the first person who gets up and really takes an initiative to start asking the questions, then everybody looks. And I'll turn around and say to my friends and says, you know what? I was asking the questions, and we all said we were going to come to the meeting and talk to the coaches about how we want to do our sports. But it's one person talking. Now, all of us should be talking as a team.
Mm-hmm.
So when we had our break, we came back, and then people started asking questions. So it came back to those athlete leadership skills.
Awesome.
And you could use that in everyday life.
Yeah, awesome. And now we have some I'm involved in helping to as an athlete trainer to train new athletes in some of the new trainings that we have, including and I was in Dublin a year ago last October for when they launched the new unified leadership. And so it's amazing the even new opportunities that were given, and maybe can you talk a little bit about the new unified leadership that is beginning to as we it's just now starting to. I think more programs are just now starting to learn about what unified leadership is. But can you maybe talk a little bit about what you see as unified leadership?
Just like unified sports, but when you look at unified leadership, you're going to talk about unified leadership in the schools.
Yeah,
where two students work together on a sports team, or two students might work together in a club. As where students come together and talk about different issues in the school and the programs in the school, or the school play, and how that school play should be ran. Here, the person with intellectual disability and the person without the disability come together and they work on how can I take that role in the school play that I want to do, even though I have a disability or a physical challenge, and they will get together and work. And with the Special Olympic athlete, it could be like at their job.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like, for say, the boss is so busy, but if you have a unified person and a unified and the athlete work together on the job, they take the leadership skill of doing that job. It could be used in so many different ways. Even a person who is out in the community wants to join a club. Well, he'll have the skills from the unified leadership that he or she has taken and said, I like to join the Rotary, but I don't know much about the Rotary. And being a person with intellectual disability, if I just have that little bit of help that somebody can help get me through, I think I could do the Rotary. And that's basically what it is people taking roles, working together. One doesn't speak for the person, but helps guide that person. And then the person that he's helped guiding helps teach him about how it is to be a part of that team.
Yeah.
So everybody pulls the rope at the same time.
Yeah. It's amazing that I think once more people start to get involved in the new unified leadership program, that I think that could really even go beyond our sports programs, beyond our leadership programs, but into the hopefully into the mainstream community. Yeah.
Sort of like with your job at United. I'm pretty sure somebody has worked with you on how to do the logistics, or even beyond your job when it comes to talk about union or something like that, something else that comes up. You might have somebody to go to, and that might be a mentor, or you might choose even that person and say, hey, John, I know you know a lot about the reading and the writing and input and output of what's going to change our job. Could you give me a hand?
Yeah.
Unified leadership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or he might come back to you and say the same thing.
Yeah.
Because you worked there longer.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, you mentioned at the top of the program about being the chief inspirational officer at Special Olympics, and I want to touch on something that you brought up at the beginning of the program, that you said that it was a tough title, that it's a tough job. And maybe can you explain a little bit more for our listeners on what do you mean by that being having this job, having this title as Chief Inspirational Officer at Special Olympics, that a lot of people see you as, and I'm sure a lot of people probably don't really realize, just like being a Southern Tribal International Global Messenger, I'm sure the same thing is for you. A lot of people see all these amazing opportunities that you or I that we get, but like they don't realize just how tough of a job
It's just like playing the sport.
What?
It's like playing the sport.
Yeah.
You know, they the Michael Jordan do that hoop, but how many times did it take him to run up and do that, dunk that ball and turn around and spin? They don't know how many times it took him to do that. And it's just like being an international, a global messenger, or, you know, me being the chief inspirational officer. They don't realize that you have to go to boards. You have to do a lot of reading. You have to do a lot of preparation. You're working with different attitudes of people who might be new and come onto the board and don't understand why an athlete is serving on the board. Or it's a whole portfolio of things that you have to do. I might be called. Of course, now we can't do it down the pandemic, but there were times where I was at home and I got called into SOI, and I had to find the quickest Greyhound going or hitch a ride to somebody. Now they have it's better transportation now, but just think about, I had to be down at the office because this is going on. And I get the call. I just came in from something else, and I get this call and say I have to be at Washington. I had to jump up and go to Washington, whether I want to get that extra hour of sleep or not, or be at a board meeting because there's a tough discussion, and everyone on that board has to be there. And I could have two choices. I could sit there and act like I don't know, or I could be a part of the solution. And hopefully, me and the chief inspirational officer, it pressures you to be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
So it could be a board project. It could be something happened. It could be a matross of things, but that is your job. You're there to represent the movement. You're not there to represent Loretta Clairborne. I'm there to represent the movement. So what is asked of me, it makes it hard on me because it's hard for me to understand what I read.
Yeah.
So it takes extra times. Like when I go to board meetings, I said, please send my materials a little bit early so I can sit down and read them and understand them.
Yeah.
Before people, they think, oh, you're the Sergeant Shriver Global Messenger. You get a nice suit, you get a ring, you get this and that. But they don't realize that when they go to, you know, different events, say if it's the World Games and they bring the Sergeant Shriver Global Messengers, those people are on their toes. There's no for rest.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know.
You've been there.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, it's
same thing with the chief inspirational officer.
Yeah. There's what a lot of people realize with like the wing or the suit or like what they don't realize that it takes us a lot more time to process and read or practice the speech or get ready for the reception. Like I know like the 2 weeks that we were in Abu Dhabi, like by the middle, like I think by the Sunday, so like right at the like halfway point during those games, like we were so tired that we did take a break by the pool at the hotel that we were all staying at. But like, yeah, a lot of people don't realize is that there's a lot that goes into this job, these jobs, whether you're a Southern Tribal International Global Messenger or you're the Chief Inspirational Officer. So it's yeah. I think it's really I think it gives all listeners a lot of insight. You're giving our listeners a lot of insight into the behind the scenes of what really goes into these types of high profile jobs.
Exactly. And then you can get there prepared. Like I had to speak to the Crown Prince, and it said, Loretta, you're going to be the keynote speaker. They didn't tell me ahead of that. They just said I was one of a panel of people.
Yeah.
So I have to be ready for anything. I remember, and you're just like being the Sargent Shriver Global Messenger. I'm pretty sure you went to events and they says, okay, Daniel, you're speaking at this first, and so-and-so speaking at this second, and all of a sudden you get there and they said, Daniel, you're not speaking at this group. You're going to speak at the next group.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Your mind is prepared to speak at that group.
Yeah, and then you have to quickly. It's kind of like this on Gumby that you have to learn how to be flexible to change quickly. And you touched on and that was another note that I made, not in the notes I sent you, but that when you spoke to the Crown Prince, we on our entire class of Sargent Shriver International Global Messengers, we attended that. It was an invitation only event that at that, I'm blanking the name of the hotel, but that 7-star hotel.
Yes.
Right before the welcome reception was I think it was called Loretta Clairborne's. I'm blanking on the name of. I'm blanking on the name of that event, but you spoke about women in sports.
Women in sports.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit. And the Crown Prince was there, and we were all there in the audience. And tell us, because that was an amazing. I know that we had to wear headphones for the translation, but exactly. that was an amazing event to. I don't know if it was videotaped or not, but if there's
I think with the Crown Prince, I think they didn't allow videotaping because when he's in the presence, and in fact, I went back to Abu Dhabi this past October, and I was with his brother with the schools, and I've been speaking at the schools there, and I was supposed to go back, but then the pandemic came. But just being in that group of people, and at first I thought I was just one of the people on the panel, and then when I got there, they said, "No, you're speaking. You're our keynote." So I'm looking at my friends who were serving on the panel, and then actually I did get to serve on the panel, but it's pretty tough because I don't use notes. And then I'm in a country where it's pretty tough if I have to deliver this message and get these people to understand in this part of the world about the power of women being in sport. If I can just open their eyes. And here after that, I thought to myself, wonder what's going to happen with this. And now here's a Crown Prince who wants his country to be the most inclusive country for people of determination. They don't even use people with intellectual disability. That said a lot to me.
Yeah, it did. It did.
It said a lot. And this Crown Prince, he wants his country to be number one in inclusion and acceptance of women doing sport. His games had 50% women, 40%.
Yeah.
40%. But, to go from 15% to 40 is a huge drop.
Yeah.
And must have impressed the Crown Prince so much that he now wants all his schools inclusive.
Yeah. It's amazing. I think that the legacy that we will there a part of history, that was, I think that being there, that was a historic moment for not just the UAE, but I think for the globe, and in particular for that region. I even walking around there, the whole term of people with that we refer to us as people with determination, and I think that was the legacy for. I think, and maybe you can comment on this. I think that there was two legacies coming out of those games. Is one was really changing the tone of, instead of referring to us as people with intellectual disabilities, but people with determination. I think that was one, that was one legacy that hopefully more countries, including here in the States, here in America, that we can hopefully adapt to. And the other one was more women in sports. So maybe do you want to touch on, I think those, and if you agree, and then maybe comment on those two legacies that I think kind of came out of those games, that really changing it to people with determination, and then to increase more women in sports.
Yes, and you got to remember you're doing in the area where women were not even at one time allowed to speak. Mm-hmm. Here's a crown prince that has belief in people. And you got to remember that country was only built since 1972. I remember being in high school, my teacher said something about a country being built in the desert. And I was like, holding my head down, and I got detention because I wasn't listening. And I'm like, yeah, right. How are you going to have a country in the desert? And you see what was there. Yeah. They have an infrastructure that makes us look sick. Back to women in sport, this to have the strength to imply into our games that we should have more women taking part in sport sent the message, because even they just had a big competition in Africa. In Africa, they decided to have this competition. It was just held like back in January, and it was 50% women. So they saw what happened in the Middle East. And they said, we're willing to do this, to make more opportunities for women. Mm-hmm. And then getting back to people of determination, where the Crown Prince says, I want all of our schools open. Just recently, he has given some huge amount of money to open up more schools to become more inclusive with unified school champion school programs across the world and in neighboring countries like Africa, continent of Africa, and other countries where there is no support. He has given a boatload full of money. I don't want to give the price. Yeah. Help other people. So this person, this Crown Prince, put his actions where his mouth is. Awesome.
Yeah. And I think hopefully a lot of other world leaders, and we won't get into, especially with those an election here in the States happening in a month. We don't want to get into politics on this show, but like, I think hopefully more world leaders can learn from the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi that
they are. I think you can see things happening.
Yeah.
So being more open.
Yeah. Well, one thing our guests.
It's a good thing. Yeah. It's good for all humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good for all humanity. I think that's a good lesson. So we're going to quickly move on. Our guest on the Special Chronicles show is Loretta Clairborne, Chief Inspirational Officer of Special Olympics, and share with us maybe a brief. We don't have that much more time in the program, but maybe share a brief favorite memory of being the Chief Inspirational Officer. Is there a favorite memory that you have from this job?
There are memories I have, but it's just memorable to see Special Olympics, how much it has grown and how it has taken a body of people who weren't recognized for their gifts that they have been blessed with or even seen. So if you're saying about being a memory about being a Chief Inspirational Officer, in a sense, a Chief Inspirational Officer is the person who helps the movement grow. I would say about the whole movement, the power of what people can do. Just seeing you. I mean, I cried when I sat at the 50th anniversary and heard about your job and saw the clip of working at United. That is a great memory to me. Yeah. And that's empowerment of people. So my biggest memory is seeing how much I was empowered and see how much people are empowered around the world.
Yeah.
I would have to say, when it comes to the Crown Prince, again, the empowerment of a society that was so closed is now open and willing to give and work with all people, women, people with intellectual disability, inclusions in their school. I mean, to see the power and the blessings that has came out. Person who believed that someone who was told they can't now can.
Yeah.
If given the chance.
Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing that we're able to feel empowered to really make a difference and make a change within society. And so there was I forgot to actually look up when this movie came out, but I believe there was a movie in 2000. Yeah, that's why I haven't seen it, but hopefully I can see it, and maybe you can also in if you can share with us what was it like having a movie made about your life. I believe it was called the Loretta Clairborne story. And maybe share with us what was that like, having these Hollywood filmmakers make a movie about your life, and also where can we watch this movie?
Well, there probably could be a copy sent to you, but if I were you, I would go to Special Olympics Incorporated and ask them for a copy. But when they first did the movie, I said to myself, no, I'm not into that. My life is my life. And then after some persuasion from Tim Shriver and some woman, one of my best friends, Nora Mason, to me, Loretta, why don't you let them make a movie on your life? I said, no, I'm not into that. I don't do that. That's just not my thing. And then one night, I was sitting with Nora. She had a little baby, and her husband and I, and we were sitting. We went to this little restaurant, and just happened to be sitting there looking over the city of Waterbury. And she says, Loretta, maybe this could change somebody's life. And she says, what do you think about having the movie done? I said, I'm not into that, Nora. I'm sorry, Mrs. Mason, I'm not into that. And then finally, we were sitting there just picking at my food, and she says, Loretta, did you ever think about the child who was treated bad like you? And then something hit me in the head. And I turned around and I looked, and she says, just think about the kid who lives on the other side of the track, doesn't even have an intellectual disability, but just because of where he or she lives at, they're looked down at. Or just because of what he or she is not as smart or has the financial means is looked down at. Says maybe this movie could help another child feel better about a child like you during your time. And I looked at her and I said, I'll think about it. Then I was over at my friend's house, Tim Shriver. They had a couple little kids, just little tiny guys. I would go up and stay with them on Cleveland Avenue in Connecticut. And one night he came down. It was a long day at the office. We were working the games, and I was doing a 60,000 piece mailing and going out and speaking to get volunteers and raise money. And that evening, it was still nice and sunny out, and it was hot. And he said to me, Loretta, did you ever think, he's sitting there after he had his meal, reading the paper, and he says, Loretta, I'm going to ask you a question. I said, yeah, Tim, what's up? And I'm sitting there knitting. He says, what do you think about doing the movie? And I looked at him. I said, I told you once. I told you twice. I said, I'm not into that. And then we got to talking. I said, okay, Tim, I know what Miss Nora said to me. If it could help one child in the school feel better about somebody like me, or another child who has a disability or comes from the other side of the track or might live differently or speak another language, if it could help a child know how it feels by watching this movie, they can make a difference in somebody else's life. It's worth it.
Awesome.
That's to go. I wasn't happy about it at first. I was very strict about the script. They did 3 scripts. And then one script, I had my advocate read it, and she would sit down with me and we would go over it. And I said to her, Miss Janet, that doesn't sound like me. I don't like how they're saying the words, because my mom was always so strict about my English and how I use my words.
Yeah.
My mom was very strict about that. She didn't want me to walk around and stumbling over words. And she says, in my house, you go to school to learn to speak, and you want to learn how to speak correctly in my house. And that's how my mom was. And so when they got to like the third script, I said, I'm satisfied. And then they made the movie.
Awesome. Yeah. So it's really because you looked over the script and looked over the script and looked over the script again and again.
And I had somebody who understood that.
Yeah.
Sit down there and so, she would read so much, and then I would read it, and I said, Miss Janet, this doesn't seem like me. And then I was dissatisfied with one thing in the movie. They didn't have me graduating from high school. It was like I got kicked out of school and never graduated. And that was my mom's major dream for her, Loretta, to graduate from high school with a diploma.
So most of the movie is pretty true to your life, but
true to the fact, but Hollywood has liberties. They do take liberties. Okay. And that's why I had the disclaimer in the front of the movie. I fought to get that disclaimer.
Yeah. Well, kind of now, once people watch that, let's fast forward now to the 50th doing on jointherevolution.org. Those I guess in partnership with ESPN, they produced a 50 Game Changers videos, and one of them was on you, and I'll try to remember to put a link in the show notes for if our listeners go to specialchronicles.com and look in the show notes for episode 397 of the Special Chronicles show. We'll put a link to where people can watch the 50 Game Changers episode that they did on yours, which is, I think, only maybe 2 to 3 minutes long. And so now, if we fast forward from the movie to now ESPN producing this 50 Game Changers video, tell us, because that was a very small snapshot of your life, but maybe now to talk about, you already have experience of being in front of the camera, being interviewed, being in the spotlight, and so now tell us about the 50 Game Changers video. What was that like?
That was awesome. I really liked that. In fact, I liked that better than I did the movie because it was really about talking about what I felt of not having a voice as a young person and how powerful your voice can be. That 50 Game Changers spoke to anyone, not only to people who have intellectual disabilities. It basically spoke to everyone, because there are a lot of children out there who are very, very bright, who have a lot going for them and don't realize it, that their voice, that if they have the chance to use their voice, they could go farther. And it specifically, it didn't focus on sport. It didn't focus on anything. It was about the power of your voice. And when I spoke to the young people who were challenged with their environment of where they lived at, none of those people had intellectual disability. I think there was maybe one or two in that whole group of students at that Crispus Attic Center. Mm-hmm. But these students, young people who had one more chance in school, or it was jail for them. And these were people that you could see on their faces, okay, it doesn't matter if I'm Black. It doesn't matter if I'm poor. It doesn't matter. I need to step my game up. I do have a voice. I can use my voice in a powerful way. And to see those young people and to see the faces there, that can make a difference in so many people. Right now, during this pandemic, I'm pretty sure there are people watching that.
Yeah.
Or picking it up somewhere on some kind of website and say, hey, this is not the end. I can use my voice. I can use myself in many different ways.
Yeah. And
me to open up.
Yeah. And it's amazing that from the sports that were competed in 280, now the athlete leadership program has really helped to not only amplify, but really give yourself, myself, all of us Southern Shriver International Global Messengers, and actually all athlete leaders within our movement, this platform to really share our voices on a global stage.
And it gives the general public the chance to listen and hear.
Yeah.
Hey, that guy over there, just because he has an intellectual disability, that guy's pretty smart over there. We need to listen to him. He just brought up something at this meeting.
Yeah.
And we have a regular city meeting. I was just at a city meeting with a lady who I'm friends with back home. She's our local coach, and they were having problems in her community. And I went to one of the meetings, and I just sat there and I listened and listened and listened. And I said, you know what? We went through that same problem. And I put my hand up to the mayor. I said, maybe we need to get back into having these meetings, starting with here in the Albemarle area. Why don't we have one of these meetings over in the West End? And why don't we have one in the South End and hear the plight of the people? And you know what? They got a lot out of that meeting, and the people were like looking at me. I said, well, just like the blight that's sitting around the city. I said, it's, if we get our neighborhoods to cleaning up and coming together, maybe things would be better. Or just have a cop driving through our neighborhood and talking to the general people who sitting out on the stoop in the summer and say, hey, what's happening in your neighborhood? Maybe we could settle. And people it was their meeting, and I'm from another neighborhood. And I figure, you know what? I have a voice. I'm going to use it. And since I know the mayor and since I know a lot of the place, I want to put my hand up. I said, a lot of this started on our end of town, and now it's on this end, and it's a shame. Such a beautiful city here. It's the first capital in the United States that the residents have to put up with this. People riding down the streets on bikes and motorbikes in the middle of Market Street. They cramped down on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people had seen me in the market, and they said, Loretta, I couldn't believe you at that meeting. I said, hey, I could have sat there like a clam in this shell and closed my shell. I said, but I live in this city too.
Yeah, amazing. And so you mentioned earlier being at the 50th anniversary that took place a couple years ago in July 2018. Since it was in my hometown in Chicago, it was an amazing event, and I think that was the first place where we met. I think I had just finished. It was at the 50th at the U.S. business meeting with all the CEOs of all the programs, and I had back up previously. I had interviewed Tim in the hallway of Tim was a guest. I think back on episode 301. I had interviewed Tim, and then I had introduced him on stage. And so after I had got off stage, I was I went to where we were standing on the side of that room, and Tim was on stage speaking. And when Tim was speaking, I had turned around, and I think that was the first time when we had first met. And maybe share with our listeners a little bit about that. When Tim was speaking and when we had first met, I think we were talking a little bit quietly when Tim was speaking. So just in case if Tim is listening, we were listening to him. But so tell us a little bit about what was that like when we first met and back in Chicago.
Well, like I said, it was just like when you as a Sargent Shriver Global Messenger go to a games, it goes one event, next event, next event.
Yeah.
A lot of times you are moving so fast that you don't remember every little event.
Yeah.
Kind of remember us talking, but we were just in there basically introducing ourselves. And we were talking about something, and I was talking about you because they had said something about you working at United Airlines, and I was so impressed with that. And I just think we just basically introduced ourselves.
Yeah,
and we
that was
about little things.
Yeah,
that we do in Special Olympics.
Yeah.
Because I didn't ask you what sport you do, and that's normally something I ask.
Yeah, I know. That was it was really
because that was the day that Tim spoke.
Yeah,
and they switched the whole program because of the Crown Prince.
Yeah, that was. So I think when we first met was in Chicago, but then with the Crown Prince, that was a year later, I think in Abu Dhabi. Yeah,
that's what I remember.
Yeah. Where they changed. So Tim was originally going to speak, or originally you were going to speak on a panel, and then it was just good, and then they changed it to where you were speaking.
No, I think we met. We were at one time. They had the girl who sang, and she was going to college or something like that.
Oh yeah, Bree. Yeah.
And we were standing there, and Tim was going to speak, and it was like a luncheon type thing. And they changed everything around in that luncheon room. And then Tim went up. I was supposed to go up at the end and then give this person from the Crown Prince's Court some flowers or something like that. And then they changed the whole thing the whole thing got changed.
Yeah.
And we were standing down just talking. And I said, congratulations on working for United. And we got to just talking just to spill. And then the whole thing was changed. And I never did go back up to give the person from the Crown Prince's Court flowers.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's.
So tight in that room. They had it so strict.
It was. It was very tight
because of security.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we had to bring our passports, and it was already.
Yeah.
The security was really. There was only all mentors couldn't even go in. I think Emily Klingo, she was the only staff that was with us, and so it was an amazing. Yeah. So let's now.
Really fast too, and I don't remember meeting you there, and I remember one time in Chicago, and that was after they introduced you and doing the United thing. That's the place where I was, crying, and I lost my Kleenex. Oh, like this.
Awesome. Well, we're a little bit over the hour mark, so we'll get just a few last minute things on this episode 397 of the Special Chronicles show. Our guest is Loretta Clairborne, Chief Information Officer at Special Olympics. And what do you see now as we look to the future of the next the next 100 years of Special Olympics? Like, I'm sure, probably in the next 50 years, 100 years, we probably won't be here. But what do you think as? Well, I should say, what do you see as the future of our Special Olympics movement?
I don't have my glass ball that I can look over. But in the next several years from now, first of all, we have to get over this pandemic. You can see Special Olympics being recognized as a movement of inclusion for all people, and no matter where you're at, whether it's playing a sport, whether it's doing a job. Mm-hmm. But I also see that Special Olympics will probably be in every nook and cranny on the globe.
Absolutely.
And our main thing is sport, providing sport, and number one, for people with intellectual disability, and number two, leading in inclusion.
Yeah.
To me, inclusion is when I'm not only invited to the dance and just sit and watch, and people says, "Oh, I include her at the dance." If I couldn't dance and if I couldn't have the benefits of the dance as everybody else, I'm not included. So being inclusion in all aspects of life. And I see Special Olympics as doing that across the world, breaking the boundaries of exclusion to inclusion for all people.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
intellectual disability.
I definitely agree with you. And I think that's a great, if we were to have that ball to kind of look into to see the future, I think, lead in inclusion and lead in, when we talk about the three programs within Special Olympics: sport, leadership, and health. Do you maybe comment on? Does it also include leading in inclusion in sport, leading in inclusion in leadership, and leading in inclusion in health? In all three of the sport, leadership, and health programs, leading and inclusion in all three of those.
In all aspects of life.
Yeah, in all aspects of life. Awesome. In all aspects of life. Yeah, that's a very good. I definitely agree with you that I think we can get there and really lead in all aspects of life, all aspects of society, to just really be that leader in inclusion. And who would have ever thought that it started back in 1968 when Eunice Shriver had created those first games. So, tell us about you mentioned the Unified Champion Schools and Unified Sports. Talk to us briefly about the importance of Unified Champion Schools and within all. I know schools today in 2020 are different, but tell us about the importance of you've gone to school. I'm sure you have visited schools across the states here, across in America, but all over the globe as well. Like you said, you and Tim visited schools in Abu Dhabi and the UAE, but all over the globe. And in your visits in schools across the globe, talks about the importance of Unified Champion Schools.
The importance of Unified Champion Schools is to bring people with and without intellectual disability into the same school social atmosphere. But when you look at it, prejudice, my mom always said, starts at home, whether it's against somebody's color or whether it's against what they believe or whether it's against something. It started at home. And for a lot of our children in schools, a lot of children aren't exposed to the students who are in a special education class down the hall or in the basement, such as what I did. Believe it or not, there are still a lot of schools like that, but it's breaking down. And the reason why that atmosphere is breaking down is because of this unified sports. And we don't look at this regular ed student to be the top football player to be a part of this program. We look at the general ed student who might be very bright, don't have a lot of time for sport, but want to get out there and know and wonder why those children are separated down in that special education class. Why shouldn't they be a part of our school? Why shouldn't they be in the play? Why shouldn't they be a part? So it creates a prejudice by being close to that class. So we came in with this Unified Champion Schools, Unified Sports, and we're pouring those children who have different needs into the classroom slowly by introducing them, and the regular ed students are coming together to say, hey, look, I go to William Penn Senior High School. I graduated from William Penn Senior High School, and I'm so proud of where I graduated from school. Whereas a student with intellectual disability and other challenges can say, I graduated from William Penn Senior High School, and I'm so glad I had the experience to be a part of my student body. So it's to break down the prejudice. And boy, as you can see, how the whole school movement has changed towards people who are differently able and bringing them a more part of their schools. And yes, there is still a lot of work to be done.
Awesome.
And when you break down that prejudice, you break down the prejudice in the next leg of life when you come out and go to work and be in the community.
Awesome. And talk to us now as we come to a close. Talk to us about the importance of athlete leadership. We mentioned the athlete, the very early years of the athlete leadership programs, but talk to us about the importance, and I guess more really talk about the impact that the athlete leadership program is having on our Special Olympics movement, but really more, as you mentioned, it's really more about getting out into the mainstream community.
It's very important. Yeah. Athlete leadership programs are very important, even more today, because a lot of our people are out in the workforce of working. A lot of our folks are out in the workforce of playing sport and in their communities. And the athlete leadership is a guide to them taking more leadership roles in their community or in their program or in their sport. And we find, we know it's true now that people train to lead. And say one day, one of our athlete leaders, and I've met a person, I can say it's done happen. We have athletes as coaches. We have a woman, now she has health problems, but she was a true official in volleyball, whether it was college, whether it was high school or professional. She actually was a volleyball coach who was a paid member. So it goes to show that with the leadership skills that they learn, they can go on and fulfill their goals, whether it's in sport, whether it's in school. I'm pretty sure with some of the leadership skills that I've learned, if I didn't have them, I wouldn't be able to own a home and maintain it and take care of a budget.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's, I think it's thanks to the Bank of America that is one of the main sponsors for our athlete leadership program, that they've got this, I'm blanking on the name of this training that they have for us, but I think it's Better Money Habits. And
yes, it's an excellent program.
It is. Yeah. I had I know opportunity to attend that. They one of the days doing our SSIGM training in Washington D.C. They came out and talked to us all about that, and that was really beneficial. So that's one of the many, I think, programs and trainings that we have as a part of our athlete leadership.
That's one of my favorite programs.
Yeah, it is.
Use that program.
Yeah. So let's now a final question that I always ask when in Abu Dhabi, when there's a few of us SSIGMs will producing the Abu Dhabi Daily Show, which listeners can go back on SpecialOlympics.org and do a search for Abu Dhabi Daily Show, and you can find those. But a final question that I asked all of those guests, and then I continue to always ask, is, what does inclusion mean to you? So I'm going to, as we come to a close, ask you as well, what does inclusion mean to you? You mentioned when we talked about inclusion when we talked about the future of Special Olympics and of our movement really leading to inclusion. But now when we talk about that word inclusion, and within the inclusion revolution, we talk a lot about inclusion within our movement. But when it comes down to it, and we talk about inclusion, what does inclusion mean to you?
What does inclusion mean to me?
Mm-hmm.
Inclusion means to me, no matter what I choose to do in a public setting or anywhere in my life, whether it's my community, whether it's going to a club, whether it's going out to have a social gathering, that I am fully included and not excluded in any way. When I walk out my door and I decide that I want to go up to the park and there's something going on that's inviting the whole community, I'm fully included. I'm not excluded. So inclusion to me means I get to play the whole game. I get to be a part of the whole community. That's inclusion.
Absolutely. So now share with our listeners, this is the point of the episode as we come to a close, where you can kind of share how can our listeners connect with you on social media. For our podcast listeners, we'll put links on specialchronicles.com
with social media. I'm not a fan of Facebook. I'm a pretty busy person.
Yeah.
I do a lot of volunteer work. I knit hats for hospitals.
Awesome.
And I have a life, so I don't do much with Facebook. I'm sorry. But Special Olympics, they have Facebook, and through your links, they could probably connect.
Well. Yeah. And
I'm sorry, it's has a much more valuable than sitting on the phone all day looking at games.
Absolutely. So
I'd rather be knitting hats for babies who could really use them.
Awesome. So our listeners can go to LorettaClairborne.com to learn more about you, and we'll make sure to put that link as well as to your 50 Game Changers, and if we can find a link to where people can watch that movie about your story, We'll put all that in the show notes on specialchronicles.com, as well as our listeners can go to, I'm finding I've got the other link here somewhere. Oh, I think let me, they can also, hold on. They can also go to, go to specialolympics.org and to find out more about the sport programs, the sport leadership and health programs, right? And is there anything else that you want to mention? Well, they can also read your bio on there as well on the board of directors page. But is there anything else you want to mention? I
think you hit the nail on the head when you said LorettaClairborne.com. They can go to that website and they can see almost everything.
Awesome. So go to LorettaClairborne.com and find out more about Loretta. And if you want to connect and find out about your local Special Olympics program and connect with them on social media, specialolympics.org is the place to go. And we remind you that you can, I'll mention that Special Chronicles link at the end, but would add about an hour and a half, so it's time to come to a close and share with us now any final thoughts on your overall time here today on the Special Chronicles show that you want to share with our listeners.
I'd like to thank you first, Daniel, for what you have done to do the podcast and all your successfuls being a Special Olympics Sargent Shriver Global Messenger. And this podcast, I'm pretty sure, is going out to a lot of people who would really look up to it. It's a great podcast, and it shows the power of a person using their voice and the tools that they have and your leadership skills. So awesome. I would like to close with that. Thank you, awesome. And may blessings be with you.
Awesome. Thank you. And once again, our listeners can visit Special Chronic. Let me go ahead and put that up on the screen. Our listeners can visit specialchronicles.com to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast. And remember to rate, review, and follow us to be notified of new episodes that drop weekly, as the kids say, drop weekly on the Special Chronicles Network, your source of finding joy, acceptance, and inclusion that gives respect and voice to people with special needs. I hope you have enjoyed this week's episode. It's been a great honor talking with you, Loretta. Our guest has been Loretta Clairborne, Chief Inspirational Officer at Special Olympics. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode of the Special Chronicles show right here on specialchronicles.com. So remember to tell your coworkers, friends, and family to listen and subscribe to this original podcast right here on specialchronicles.com. We'll see you back here next week on the digital podcast airwaves. And until next week, remember, choose to include. Until next week, remember, choose to include.
Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
And before I hit pause on that audio, Noah, if I can click it, she commented and said, 2 amazing athlete leaders. So that was one comment from one of our listeners. So I'm going to go ahead and hit stop on that. Support for Special Chronicles comes from listeners like you. As an independent public media podcast, Special Chronicles will always be there for you. Now we're asking you to be there for us. As a non-profit independent media organization, we can only make programs like Special Chronicles with listener support. Our programs provide weekly, candid, honest, and inspiring conversations about the people with disabilities community that creates awareness, support, and advocacy within each week's episode. Listeners tell us our shows are an enjoyable and necessary podcast for the intellectual and developmental disability community and everyone else who is able to listen to stories about life from a different angle. Please, if you and your family love our weekly podcasts, make a one-time, monthly, or annual gift of thanks today. Support this podcast at specialchronicles.com/give. That's specialchronicles.com/give. Support for Special Chronicles comes from ComEd. Special Chronicles is proud to partner with the ComEd Energy Force Ambassador Program. The Energy Force is the country's first energy efficiency education program designed for and taught by people with disabilities. ComEd is powering lives, and Wary is powering us here at Special Chronicles to keep the lights on and our technology is powered on. As ComEd powers the lives of us, they are literally giving a voice to people with special needs. We thank ComEd for the generous support of our mission at Special Chronicles. Learn more at specialchronicles.com/ComEd. That's specialchronicles.com/ComEd. Support for Special Chronicles comes from United Airlines Bridge Disability Business Resource Group. Special Chronicles is proud to partner with United Airlines and the Bridge BLG. Bridge BLG is committed to being an ally for all employees and customers with disabilities. Bridge helps to create internal awareness to keep accessibility needs in mind and partner with key organizations to empower disability inclusion for employment and travel. Bridge, connecting people of all abilities. Book your travel today on United.com or on the award-winning United app. Learn more on United's commitment to disability inclusion for employment and travel at specialchronicles.com/United. That's specialchronicles.com/United. Special Chronicles is hosted by Podbean Podcast Hosting, the easiest, most affordable option to get started in podcasting. At Special Chronicles, we proudly host our weekly podcast with Podbean and highly recommend you use Podbean Podcast Hosting to get started in podcasting today. Sign up for an unlimited hosting plan and get 1 month free now to get started in podcasting today when you visit specialchronicles.com/Podbean. That's specialchronicles.com/Podbean. Our live streams are powered by StreamYard, the easiest way to create professional live streams. StreamYard is a live streaming studio in your browser. Interview guests, share your screen, and much more. Stream directly to Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and other platforms. Sign up for StreamYard today using our StreamYard referral link when you visit specialchronicles.com/StreamYard. That's specialchronicles.com/StreamYard.
We're not just athletes.
We are the ambassadors of an uprising.
Peaceful protesters.
In a rebellion against anyone
who has a fear of difference.
Difference.
Our demands are
equality,
dignity, and the recognition of our shared humanity.
We will not stop
or accept anything less.
Today, our world is
more divided than ever.
And coming together has never been more urgent.
The revolution
is inclusion.
Find out more at jointherevolution.org.
Thank you for listening to this special rebroadcast episode of the Special Chronicles Podcast with Special Olympics Chief Inspiration Officer Loretta Clairborne. Before we conclude, we remember to be sure to keep following the Special Chronicles Podcast or tap that follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows as new episodes drop weekly. Don't miss our original content that will help you make impactful and inclusive connections in your life through our podcast. And remember to visit our website, specialchronicles.com. That's specialchronicles.com. We can stream our archives of over 750 episodes absolutely for free. And to follow Special Chronicles on social media, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to your favorite shows. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week right here on specialchronicles.com. And until then, remember, choose to include and disabled voices matter. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Special Chronicles Podcast. Our podcast was produced by Daniel Smrokowski on the Special Chronicles Network. Follow Special Chronicles on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Subscribe, rate, and review Special Chronicles on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our website, specialchronicles.com, where you can stream our archives of over 500 episodes absolutely for free. Also, there's a list of our favorites, original series, award-winning columns, and blogs. And sign up for our newsletter to receive exclusive bonus content delivered to your inbox. Again, specialchronicles.com. Special Chronicles is hosted by Podbean Podcast Hosting. Our live streams are powered by StreamYard. Thanks as always to our business manager, Adam Smrokowski, who always encourages us to never give up. I'm Daniel Smrokowski, back next week with more stories.
Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.